Tensions are running high in Pakistan over a controversial law on blasphemy. The Pope has stepped into the row, calling for the law's repeal. But inside the country, its supporters have been taking to the streets. Is this law being misused? And is the conservative religious base in this troubled country slowly taking over? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm James Bays. Pakistan's blasphemy laws are in the spotlight once again following the assassination of Salman Taseer. The governor of Punjab was gunned down for supporting proposed reforms to the law, which says anyone who's convicted of speaking ill of Islam and the Prophet Muhammad faces the death penalty. The chairman of Pakistan's People's Party, Bilal Bhutto Zardari, vowed to continue Taseer's mission. And now Pope Benedict XVI has waded in, leaving the religious right in Pakistan fired up. Banu Bhatnagar has more.
A clear response to the Vatican. Mind your own business.
As far as the Pope's statement is concerned, it has not only offended 180 million Muslims in Pakistan, it has also hurt the sentiments of the entire Islamic world. This is an interference in Pakistan's internal matters. Pakistan is an Islamic and ideological state. The majority of Pakistanis will not tolerate any attempt to repeal this law.
It comes after the head of the Roman Catholic Church made this statement on Monday.
Particular attention must be made of the law against blasphemy in Pakistan. I once more encourage the authorities of that country to take the necessary steps to repeal that law.
Pakistan's blasphemy law, under which insulting Islam is a capital offence, is a divisive issue. Punjab's slain governor, a vocal critic of the law, was gunned down last week by his own security guard over his stand on the issue. Salman Taseer's killing has sent shockwaves through Pakistan, not least because his murderer has been widely praised for his actions.
I think what's new is this level of an assassination and the brutality of this murder, with 27 bullets being pumped into Salman Taseer. I think those two things are new, and I think what's also new is the 24/7 media in Pakistan, which not only has been beaming these images of the assassination and those Pakistanis that are celebrating it, but also the build-up to the assassination, the criticism of the law, and the resulting overreaction, gross overreaction by the radical right in Pakistan.
And now the Pope's request to repeal the law hasn't gone down well.
The Pope's opinion is wrong, because I think the Pope is not allowed to speak about our internal matters. The blasphemy law is implemented on everyone, whether Hindu, Muslim or Christian. No religion is allowed to say anything against any other religion, and this is our own law.
Salman Taseer died for voicing his opposition to the blasphemy law, a law the Pakistani government now says it has no plans to repeal. Banu Bhatnagar for Inside Story.
Joining me now for more on this, I'm joined by our guests. They're both in Islamabad today. Zafar Jaspal is a political analyst and professor of international relations at the Quaid-e-Azam University. And Omar Waresh, also in Islamabad. He's based there for the British newspaper The Independent. Now, I want to ask you both the same thing to start with, and I'll start with you, Omar. Just give some background to our viewers. What exactly is this blasphemy law?
Well, James, thank you for having me. The original blasphemy laws were introduced by the British in the Penal Code of 1860 as a means of maintaining law and order amongst the different sects and religions of the subcontinent of British India. Subsequently, during General Zia-ul-Haq's dictatorship, a third, harsher clause was introduced. It's known as 295C of the Penal Code, which means that a death sentence is mandatory for anyone who is deemed to have committed blasphemy. The problem with this law is that it is very vaguely worded, used arbitrarily. It stops the state from being a neutral actor, and what we have seen with these individual cases is either that vulnerable sections of the community are persecuted as a result, or Islamist militants and other vigilantes use this as a means of cover when they pursue their own sectarian agenda or even personal vendettas against people of a minority faith.
Mr. Jaspal, give us your take on that.
Look, when we look about this blasphemy law, we have to not ignore that laws are the product of an evolutionary process, which we call it customary laws. And within the subcontinent, especially in Pakistan, it is very much a customary law as well as the religious law, and it has support by the constitution. The history is long of this law. It's not started with Zia al-Haq, from where the people have been trying to refer it. Yes, there was an added clause to make it more stricter, but at the same time we have to see the problem is not with the law. We cannot say law is black or white. We have to see that the problem is in the rule of law within the state. And when we see the execution, I think that the Zia's portion has not been executing yet. Yes, law has been misused by sometimes ignorant people, but it doesn't mean that we start looking the people's problems or people's shortcomings or the way they exploit the state law enforcement system, or the way they exploit the the absence of rule of law within the state and society in their favor. That is a different story. So that's why when we look about the blasphemy law, we cannot ignore here what is the historical context, what is the customs, what is the constitution, and these laws always evolve. They cannot be enforced overnightly, and we cannot forget its long history.
You say laws always evolve. Let me be quite clear on your position. Do you think this law should be rewritten and changed in any way?
My understanding is that law, when we read the law, it is very clear. Yes, on the execution of the law, there should be a new sort of what we call it, a constitutional group, which are experts, and it should be executed accordingly. Because we have a judicial system, and within that judicial system, the law can be interpreted and executed. There's no need to make a debate on the law on the streets and trying to implement that, okay, this is wrong, this is right.
Omar Waresh, should the law be changed?
Indeed. I have to disagree with Mr. Jaspal on a number of counts. First of all, there was no evolution of this law. It was brought in by a military dictator. This was not something that organically evolved out of society and suddenly public representatives in parliament debated this and felt it was necessary. The problem with this law is also how the state deals with it. It is, as I said, it stops the state from being neutral. Beyond that, it's also at odds with the Pakistani constitution. Jinnah's ideal, the founder of his country, was a liberal ideal, a pluralistic ideal, which secured the fate of its many minority communities. What we've seen instead is that the state, using this law, has become partisan, that is actively complicit when it comes to the vulnerability of its minorities. As a result, I think it should ideally be repealed, but the reality is, given Pakistan and given the atmosphere that's been created since the assassination of Salman Taseer, that may not be likely. So certain procedural changes must be made to, at least at the very minimum, ensure the security of religious minorities in Pakistan.
No, but
Go ahead.
But here we have to not forget when originally it was introduced, and we have to not forget when the state was created. We have not to forget the objective resolution. We have to not to forget when the Constitution of 1973 was written. We have to not to forget the Article 31 and 33. They were part of the original Constitution.
Yes, but Mr. Jaspal, the thing
when
is,
I was saying
the reality
evolutionary,
is that
when I was saying evolutionary, we cannot
something?
simply put the blame. Yes, we have a difference of opinion on Zia. That is, I do support it. But at the same time, we cannot link this law purely with Zia. We have to see the background. And there are a number of the other states where these kinds of the laws are there. We should try to look at things with more rational and open-minded, especially instead of just focusing on one dictator. Yes, I do agree. If dictator has introduced it for its own objectives, it doesn't mean.
OK, well, can I just raise one of the issues there that Omar Waresh raised, Mr. Jaspal, and that is that this goes against the vision of Mohammed Ali Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan. He said, we have many non-Muslims, they will enjoy the same rights and privileges as other citizens, and they'll play their rightful part in the affairs of Pakistan.
That's correct. And why he said this? Because he knew that overwhelming majority and state was created by using the name of two-nation theory. And on the basis of it, that he was making it clear the protection and the safety, security, prosperity of the minorities within the state. I am not saying that, yes, if there's a need for a law to strengthen these rights, to strengthen the guarantees for their safety, security, and prosperity within the state, yes, on that one can introduce. But on the other side, simply rejecting that there is no need of blasphemy law or it was introduced by Zia, I do not agree.
Surely the test of a law is how it's implemented. Can I ask you, Omar Waresh, you go around Pakistan covering events for The Independent. Is this law working?
No, it obviously isn't. I can go back to a number of incidents, a number of tragedies where it obviously isn't. If we just go back to August 2009 in the Punjabi town of Godhra, where a Christian colony was torched by armed militants as the police stood by. 9 people were killed. All based on a rumor that was spread from a nearby village that at a Christian wedding they were tearing up pages of the Quran and throwing them in the air. There was no evidence ever marshaled to support that claim whatsoever. None of the perpetrators of that attack on that vulnerable Christian community have been brought to justice. Instead, what we end up with is an even more terrified Christian population, 9 people dead, 45 homes torched, including a number of Bibles, actually, which were shown to me by the residents of that community that were torched as a result. The desecration of the Bible happened based on a rumor that there was a desecration of the Quran. Similarly, we go forward to the attack on the Ahmadis, or even this more recent case that Salman Taseer was promoting of Asia Bibi or Asia Noreen in a village in Punjab. Now, the claim against her has been made by someone who wasn't even there.
OK, well, Mr. Jaspal, isn't that the...
But here we have
Mr.
applications of the law.
Yeah, Omar, Mr. Jaspal.
There is another point here. There's another point here.
One second, Omar, you can make that point in a moment. Mr. Jaspal, isn't that the problem with this law? Everyone would understand a case if someone made blasphemous comments on television, because everyone would see them. But this law relies on hearsay.
Okay, when we look about this thing, I do agree whatever the incidents were quoted, they were correct incidents. But at the same time, I do not say there was a problem in the law. There's a problem of absence of the rule of law in Pakistani state and society. So we have to focus on the absence of the rule of law, and we have to establish how we can go for establishing the rule of law, rather than just saying this law is correct and this law is incorrect. Tomorrow you can, and at the same time on the other side, when we look about it, that yes, minorities should be protected, and it's the responsibility of the state. If state is not doing it, we can question the state inability, but we cannot here start saying that this is because of this. There are other reasons in our socio-economic political system.
Omar Waresh, your view on that?
Well, there are a number of problems with that argument, which is this country went without this 295C, this latest amendment to the blasphemy law by Zia, for many years, without seeing the kind of sectarian hatred and the use by the states of this law perfectly fine. I mean, it's an astonishing thing that when a death sentence is made mandatory, suddenly there is a profusion of incidents of blasphemy. Why would that serve as an incentive for anyone to blaspheme when historically they had refused to do so? The other problem with that argument is when you're talking about upholding the rule of law, when it comes to incidents like Godhra, when it comes to the case of Asia Bibi, the state itself, the police stand by, prosecutors are afraid to do anything but prosecute people who have been blasphemed. An atmosphere is whipped up by militant groups and other vigilantes, and people are simply afraid because the state does not take a clear line and say that this sort of behavior is unacceptable. The state has a very poor record of standing against those people who have perpetrated crimes against minorities of this country. That law gives them the protection to do so.
OK, well, the reason we're obviously debating this right now is because of the death of Governor Taseer. Now, he was openly opposed to the blasphemy law, and he made regular comments about it on Twitter. A month before he died, he wrote, "I was under huge pressure, sure to cow down before righteous pressure on blasphemy. Refused, even if I'm the last man standing." On the day of his death, he wrote another haunting message. This is what he tweeted. My observation on minorities, a man/nation is judged on how they support those weaker than them, not how they lean on those stronger. Your response to that, Mr. Jaspal?
Yeah, my response is that yes, what happened with Governor Taseer, it's condemnable, it was wrong. It shouldn't be like this. But here, what we look about in Pakistan, there's a problem of extremism and radicalization. And this problem of extremism and radicalization is not because of the law. There are other reasons behind it. Without addressing those reasons, even if we can change the law, what will be, we'll be going to, there will be a happening. The happening will be that instead of approaching the government, the police, people will start taking in their own hands. We cannot ignore that even prior to the partition, there was enforcement. Yes, here it was referred that the sentence of death, it never had been executed. Even in the case of Asia Bibi, still there was a room. Room was for appeal in the High Court, appeal in the Supreme Court. So just jumping and trying to go it, I do agree that we are here living in a society which is religiously very much polarized on the basis of sectarianism, which is it is very much extremized. People, not in this society, go in any society where there is these kind of issues are there, they will be using these kinds of terminologies, and these laws can be used or misused, but the state responsibility is to protect it. So at the same time, I do maintain that simply condemning that the law is wrong, I'm not convinced. But on the other side, what happened with the Governor Taseer, yes, it was wrong. There's a need that if there's something wrong under this law, one can go into the court. Why they didn't go? For we have to look about these kind of the issues, that why people take law in their own hand. We should not look on this issue that this law is correct or incorrect. The law seems appropriate. There are a number of the states, they have certain, according to their own, what we call it, cultures, they make the laws. So we have to go with the customary cultures when we talk about the law.
OK, Omar Waresh, I'm told that Western diplomats were not only shocked by the death of the governor, but also the reaction to that death and the fact that he was killed by one of his own guards.
Yes, it's very worrying that someone of such a high profile can be slain down in broad daylight in the heart of Islamabad, then have it done by the very people who are supposed to be protecting him, the very people who are meant to be on the front line against the war on terrorism here. What it reveals is how this nasty sentiment has pervaded deep into the ranks of Pakistani society. The assassin was not a member of the Taliban. He was not perhaps even a Taliban sympathizer. He was, in fact, a member of the so-called moderate Brelvi sect of Islam, Sufi-leaning, if you'd have it. What this demonstrates, of course, is that the way society has been allowed to be dominated by people who have a sectarian agenda, who are willing to take law into their own hands, who are willing to demonize the minorities of his community. The difference I have with Mr. Jaspal is that his argument when it comes to the rule of law and the state is that there aren't the checks in place here to deal with extremism. In other societies, extremism exists. It exists in Europe, it exists throughout the Western world, it exists throughout the Third World, it exists in the subcontinent. But what you need is a series of laws that will keep that extremism in check. And then what you need is a state that will back that measure, that will make sure that vulnerable communities aren't persecuted in this way. At this moment, this law doesn't do anything like that. In fact, it does the reverse. It encourages vigilantes that we've seen with these individual cases. Earlier, he said that no one's been executed under this law. Correct. But 32 people have been killed in and outside court, including 2 judges by vigilantes who thought this law encouraged them and allowed them to take law into their own hands, merely because we're talking about a state that has decided, because of this law, to take on a sectarian colouring.
Mr. Jaspal, right now, the former Information Minister, Rehman, is believed to be in hiding because of fatwas against her, people threatening to kill her. Shouldn't action be taken against those people who are making those threats?
This is the wrong thing. She shouldn't be threatened. She has a right to express, but at the same time, we cannot ignore in which society we are living. We cannot ignore a society which has been very much ruralized, very much radicalized, very much the religion is part and parcel of their culture, and it's not started recently. It is part and parcel of their living since long. On the other side, when we look about these kind of things, when you deal with certain sensitive issues, there is a way to deal it. There's not a way to politicize it, just to present us, bring it. I am not here advocating anyone, but at the same time, I understand any law which has some sort of what we call it emotional linkages. There's a different way to address these things. This is not simply just we can say, okay, we can do like this way. How you can change, how even behind this law, if we see there's a long history, and it's not only in this society. We are heading towards a different kind of the things. For instance, when we look about these things, why there's a focus only on this kind, what is happening? If you can put the broader perspective, that on the other side, everywhere on the religion name, the state has been granted. For example, in the case of Sudan, the referendum is taking place where they use the ideology as a part of the separation of the South and North Sudan. We have to not ignore these ideological realities, whether we export them or not. Rationality is we can judge them, we can correctly assess them, and then we focus on society, and then we try to approach things. Instead of just what we call it, making a few statements, instead of delivering it, they create more complexities for the state and society, and that's why these problems which we have been facing. And that's the reason the Governor Salman Taseer was victim of a person who was just radicalized. Yes, law does not permit any, what we call it, any imam, any person to give a fatwa, even if there is not a law. If this kind of extremism and radicalization is within the society, they will continue with these kind of the act. So my point is that instead of changing
can I ask you about Sherry Rehman?
We have to go for it.
Is she getting enough support from her Pakistan People's Party? She was a stalwart of that party. She was Benazir Bhutto's right-hand lady. They seem to be abandoning her now, don't they?
Well, I spoke to Ms. Rehman just yesterday, and she does feel very, very isolated. In fact, when I asked her about the reaction she had to Governor Taseer's assassination, she said it was a death foretold because he had not been receiving the political support that he needed. What we've seen with his government, that it has capitulated on this question. A review of all laws which discriminate against Pakistan's most vulnerable sections of society, including minorities, is very much a part of the People's Party manifesto. Instead, what we have seen is that Law Minister Babar Awan has said that he would not allow any amendment or allow this law to be touched at all. And even more chillingly, perhaps, the Interior Minister Rehman Malik, the man tasked with maintaining law and order in this country, said that he would personally shoot any blasphemer himself, again encouraging people to take the law into their own hands. What is needed is for the state to take a firm line on this, is to say that these things aren't acceptable, to arrest people who are making death threats, to lock them up, to make examples of these things, to ban demonstrations where hate is spewed openly, not allow them to have free reign in Pakistan's biggest city, and whip up this kind of hatred.
Well, Mr. Jaspal, can I ask you on that point, this turmoil we're seeing, is there a wider mood here that's changing in Pakistan?
I think that the dangerous thing is that on the both sides, what the terms now are introduced, extremist liberalist, extremist radicalized religious, the problem is that this divide is not in favor of the state, in favor of the society. There's a need to bring together all these things. Unfortunately, here, when we look about the political parties, they are not acting to bridge the gap, which they have to do it. The reason is that on the one side, they say something, on the other side they say something, and politicians, as you all know, they have always to go with the public sentiments. So the need is to first educate the public and then to talk and discuss these kind of issues openly or debate. There's a need to bring a very much change within the setups and talk about these things. Simply saying this and this is a rejectionist approach, and I think that is not a sellable or it is not a practical approach in case of Pakistani society.
Thank you, Mr. Jaspal, and thank you to both our guests, Safar Jaspal and Omar Waresh. Normally when we invite people on Pakistan, there's no problem getting guests. I have to say they were two of the people who were prepared to appear tonight. So many others were unavailable. I think it shows you what a controversial subject this is. Thank you for joining us here on Inside Story. We want to know your views, though. What do you think of the programme, and what subjects do you think we should put in the spotlight in the coming days? Get on the email, send your comments and suggestions to insidestory@aljazeera.net. I'll see you 24 hours from now.